the need that's been expressed in other meetings to address community representation. There's sort of 4 or 5 models that have been tabled, one of which was tabled at our table. And that was that you blend sector and regional representation. So people come from places, and so some of your commercial fish representation perhaps may take on added responsibility to represent a particular region. So that's kind of one option. That's in an effort to keep the table relatively small and workable. Another option is to think about it in terms of parallel processes, where one set of processes, but this is an expanded IOAC, where the IOAC is more of a forum for feedback, and perhaps regional groups that feed into the IOAC are forums for feedback on specific products that are developed in working groups, where you bring essentially the protagonists around a particular issue together to try and develop some consensus on how to resolve those issues or issues in that place. And then you use the IOAC as a forum to get feedback on those outputs, and therefore the IOAC can be much bigger, and it may have regional representation. A third approach, and there's sort of a hybrid of this, is an expanded group, but not too expanded, where you would expand the community representation to 1 or 2 per area, where you've got Haida Gwaii, North Coast, Central Coast, and North Island. So 4 or 8 representatives of communities. So you still sort of keep it to less than 30 or 35. And a variation on that to facilitate more involvement might be you have a sort of second row. Many people have participated in meetings where you have those that are representatives at the table, and then outside of that is this representation in the room that's perhaps affiliated with representatives, but they're still in the room, sort of like a second tier or audience, or like a bullseye. And then there's the model that's been promoted by the Coastal Communities Network, or at least was discussed with us, which was you have regional forums, and they send representatives to an IOAC meeting, and the representatives are sent on the basis of whatever the issues are to be discussed at the IOAC. So a lot of the working out of solutions happens at a regional level, North Coast, Central Coast, North Island, Haida Gwaii. And if you're going to discuss transportation PNCIMA-wide, then they all send people that have interests and knowledge and can represent transportation interests from those areas together. So 4 models, and none really strongly advocated by the group. Some perspective that perhaps that Coastal Communities Network approach may be a bit challenging, but certainly could work. The other point was made that in thinking about equitable participation, it's kind of more complicated than it looks, in the sense that recognizing that commercial fish harvesting is a lot of different interests that would need to be represented as compared to, say, fish processing. You both want equitable representation of those different interests while ensuring that the table itself is not overwhelmed by a particular kind of group, like, say, too many representatives of commercial fishing. With respect to working groups, a number of suggestions were made. A science panel that might provide feedback on EBM thresholds, how EBM can be adapted to a marine environment. Economic sustainability working group, and the point was made, this is not just kind of economic sustainability is a nice thing to have if you could ever get it, but that it should deliver concrete outputs that would actually result in sustainable economic activities in communities delivering benefits on the coast, to kind of reverse the trend that's occurred over a number of years. And then working groups centered around contentious issues. And without getting into the details of the contentious issues, there's obviously some around. There's some contentious issues around transportation, in particular tanker traffic, as it relates to Enbridge and other developments. There's aquaculture, finfish aquaculture. fisheries. And when we talked about fisheries, we sort of focused in on what specifically would a fisheries working group do, noting the suggestion that was made from the other group. And even just a common vision for the future for fisheries would be quite useful. That led to another working group, is an integration working group, building on, I guess, a presentation that was made by Bud Eller at the forum. And the question is, what needs to be integrated and how? Not necessarily everything needs to be integrated. And so thinking about who needs to be brought together and how to bring them together more effectively than they have been in the past. And as another task related to that is integrating sector visions. You took all the sectors and you said, so what is your vision of the sector in the future, 20 years out? You brought those together, would they reconcile or not? And then finally an EBM working group. That is a working group short-term that consists in developing the EBM definition between now and the end of the year. With respect to meetings or workshops, renewable energy, aquaculture, and suggestion to separate finfish and shellfish aquaculture because they're very different and they have different constituencies of support out there, as you all probably know. Rare and endemic species, high productivity areas, and then one on marine protected areas. Kind of bring together existing work on marine protected areas, questions about what's possible or what's not in a marine protected area, the kinds of uses that are compatible or not. But that might be a very useful workshop to kind of bring everybody more up to speed with respect to the developing marine protected area network. With respect to existing processes, a couple of specifics. The Area A Crab Nycoon Wind Group and the Broughton Area Monitoring Plan. Both initiatives are non-government initiatives between industry and NGOs. And they may produce specific outputs that are quite useful and could be integrated into PNCIMA, much like a working group, but they have been developed by a working group. By contrast, there's things like the Transport Canada Marine Advisory Committee, which might be a useful sounding board. If there's a transportation working group, you might want feedback from a group like that. The Integrated Fish Harvest Process Committees, and the North Coast Sustainable Marine Fisheries and Communities Initiative, which may actually support a regional table in the North Coast. Feedback using the internet, access is certainly an issue, but that shouldn't be a barrier or prevent using the internet as much as possible, as has been done already with the forum. A point was made that the use of the internet, if you're trying to get feedback from the internet, using the internet on particular products, it needs to be interactive. So, for example, if you had a working group working on the EBM definition, they might have a web-based workshop that facilitated input from a broad variety of people, but that wouldn't just be sort of emails. There would be some communication and dialogue around so that there was a clear understanding of what specifically the input meant. And all of that does not replace the need for periodic face-to-face engagements. And that, I think, is a summary. But I might have missed something that was important to someone. Anything you want to add? Okay, I'm sorry that we have gone a little bit over time. And I did promise that we would open it up for anything that anybody wanted to ask about that they didn't get a chance to ask about before. So,
I just noticed you mentioned forestry and only instead of being involved in transportation, and I just want to say that it's a coastal ecosystems on high season, so the switch because it's the interface with land, and that